So we are talking about a missionary immersion among the poor modeled by Jesus Christ. Actually, this missionary methodology corresponds to a profound theological truth that is an essential part of Christian belief. The fact of the incarnation, that God himself took human form, entering in human history in the person of Jesus. It is the truth expressed by John in his gospel when he writes, "The Word became flesh and dwelled among us." We find the same truth expressed in a different way in the words of the Apostle Paul. Like Jesus himself, Paul made many references to money in the course of his teaching. Thus, for instance, in the second epistle to the Corinthians, we have two complete chapters, the 8th and the 9th, dealing with the issue of a collection of money for the poor. From the context, we can conclude that there were rich persons in the church at Corinth, and that it was a community that had many valuable human and material resources. In his exhortation to the Corinthians, Paul uses the churches of Macedonia in the cities of Philippi, Thessalonica, and Berea as a model and an incentive to challenge the Corinthians toward obedience to stewardship. In the final 9 verses of chapter 8, Paul describes eloquently the generosity of Macedonian churches. Out of the most severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. In order to describe the generosity of the Macedonians, Paul uses the word grace. Then, as a culmination of his argument, he refers to the grace of Jesus Christ himself. "For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that you, through his poverty, might become rich." Here the Incarnation offers us a pattern for service among the poor. It has been the presence of missionaries among the poor that has given place to the presence of Christian churches among the poor. Using the vocabulary of Paul, here we could say that a Christian presence among the poor starts many times with a missionary presence among the poor that carries the intention of enriching the poor. Such a presence becomes the foundation for the rise of indigenous churches among the poor with a sense of mission and a profound generosity in spite of their poverty. The book of Acts of the Apostles is a record of how the community that came to birth through the missionary presence of Jesus practiced also a life that reflected the style of Jesus. We find a valuable illustration of this when we study the first crisis that the early church in Jerusalem faced, precisely due to the problems derived from the service to the poor. We find in Acts chapter 6, in the first 7 verses, a very suggestive description of this holistic approach to mission that involves presence, proclamation, and service. This passage has a symmetric nature of its own, typical of the author of Acts. At the beginning and at the end, it makes reference to the numerical growth of the church, and in between to the crisis brought when within that diverse community an effort was made to help the poor. Through the passage, the Greek word diakonio, or words related to it, appear several times. This word represents one of the 3 families of words from the Greek which are usually translated as service in English. The sentences that contain it are translated in our passage as distribution of food, wait on tables, and ministry to the word. In this way, the activity of the apostles that was to focus on preaching and prayer was service of the word, and the activity of those appointed to organize the distribution of food to the poor was service of the tables. The passage shows that for this early church, both aspects of mission, proclamation and service to the need of the poor, were important and necessary. Moreover, both of them had a common root, and in order to perform both of them efficiently, a restructuring of leadership in the community became necessary and was implemented. At this point, we may establish the connection with the missionary lesson given by Jesus to which I referred before. The study of the development of this family of words shows the degree to which the person and work of Jesus Christ had a decisive influence on the Greek language as used in the New Testament. Diakoneo in classic Greek usage meant something different, because in Greek eyes, serving is not very dignified. Ruling and not serving is proper to a man, the formula of the sophist. How can a man be happy when he has to serve someone, expresses the basic Greek attitude. What brought a new content into this family of words was the person and ministry of Jesus. Jesus' view of service grows out of the Old Testament command of love for one's neighbor, which he takes and links with the command of love for God to constitute the substance of the divinely willed ethical conduct of his followers. In so doing, he purifies the concept of service from the distortions which it has suffered in Judaism. Jesus' attitude to service is completely new as compared with the Greek understanding. The decisive point is that he sees in it the thing which makes a man his disciple. So there is an evolution of this family of words within Greek vocabulary. The significant difference between what service meant in the Greek culture and what it came to mean in the New Testament usage was only possible because a man named Jesus existed, and he had a strong impact upon the memory of a community and the culture created by that community. When the New Testament writers try to explain the concrete reality of the life of Jesus in order to grasp the meaning of that life, they find their best point of reference in the servant songs of the prophet Isaiah. Thus Jesus' actions are described, and at the same time an explanation is provided. Jesus served as he fed the multitudes, healed the sick, criticized oppression, attacked sin, befriended marginal people, but he also preached and taught. Actions do not have meaning or make sense unless you explain them. Clear explanation was also an action of service. That is known as the service of the word. In other words, the service provided by those that taught the gospel and proclaimed it. The test of faithfulness to Jesus in the service to the poor will be first the qualities of the missionary presence among the poor. It involves the practice of certain virtues and the embodiment of certain attitudes, but also the proclamation of the name that makes them possible. The service of naming and worshiping the servant Messiah is essential to grasp the real dimensions of living as his followers. There is a growing need for more servant evangelists and more evangelist servants after the pattern of Jesus.